How many of you have heard stories related to fairies? I have heard a lot during my childhood days. Do anything like fairies exist in this universe? Today in this video, we are going to explore the mystery of fairies. It is said to be a legendary creature, and stories of such creature are very popular in European cultures like Slavic, Germanic, English, and French. Fairies are taken to be a kind of spirit or supernatural entity that are not subject to the laws of nature. Myths and stories about fairies do not have a single origin, but are rather a collection of various customs and beliefs of different societies. There are different beliefs in different cultures regarding the origin of fairies. According to the Christian tradition, a fairy is either a demoted angel or an evil spirit or a kind of demon. Fairies are taken as deities or god in the pagan belief system. Pagan is the word which was first used by the early Christian people to describe those people in the Roman Empire who believed in multiple gods and goddesses. There are also some cultures in which people believes that a fairy is the spirit of a dead person, or it is a kind of creature similar to human beings that came into existence in this world before the evolution of modern humans. Sometimes it is also said as the spirit of nature. There was a time period during which people used the term fairy to describe a specific magical creature with human appearance or those who have different magical powers. At other times, it has been used to describe any magical creatures such as goblins and gnomes. Talking about goblins and gnomes, have you ever heard about these creatures before? A goblin is a type of mysterious creature that has different magical powers. He also has the knowledge of different spells that helps him to get transformed into different creature. A gnome is another type of small mysterious creature that lives underground and is not a human being but possesses all the characteristics of a normal human being. The term fairy do not only refers to these magical creatures, but the term is also used to describe the place from where these beings come from, known as the land of fairy in most of the fairy tales. Various stories of fairies also tells about the ways and need to ward off fairies using protective charms. Common examples of such charms include church bells, wearing clothing inside out, four-leaf clover, and food. Four-leaf clover is a rare variation of the common three-leaf clover. Generally, it is a small plant with three small leaves. Fairies were sometimes thought to haunt specific locations. It is said that fairies try to lead travelers to a particular direction using will-o'-the-wisp, which is a kind of atmospheric ghost light seen by travelers at night, especially over swampy and marshy areas. Before the advent of modern medicine, fairies were often blamed for sickness, particularly tuberculosis and birth deformities. In addition to their origin in folklore, fairies were a common feature of European culture and were especially popular in the United Kingdom during the eras ruled by Queen Victoria and King Edward VII. According to some historians, fairies were adopted from and influenced by the Peris of Persian mythology. Later descriptions of Peris were made in great detail in various Persian works. A peri was illustrated to be fair, beautiful, and extravagant nature spirits that were supported by wings. There is a possibility that this might have influenced many cultures of Europe. Fairies generally has a human appearance and also has great magical powers. Fairies of various kinds have been reported, ranging from quite tiny to the size of a human. Some smaller fairies could even expand their figures to imitate humans. On Orkney, which is a group of islands, fairies were described as creatures whose height is little shorter, dressed in dark grey, and sometimes these creatures are also seen in armor. In some folklore, fairies have green eyes. Some depiction of fairies show them with footwear, while others as barefoot. Fairies with wings to fly are very rare in folklore. but modern illustrations often include dragonfly or butterfly wings. They flew by means of magic and sometimes seen perched on ragwort stems, a kind of flowering plant, and sometimes even on the back of birds. A fairy is not always thought to be a kind of magical creatures or a spirit of nature. One story from Christian religion describes a group of angels revolting and God ordering the gates of heaven shut. Those still in heaven remained angels, those in hell became demons, and those caught in between became fairies. Other stories says that some angels, not being godly enough, yet not evil enough for hell, were thrown out of heaven. This might have led to the concept of Shaitan, which is a kind of fallen angel. Some of the philosophies of 19th century in England states a belief in angelic nature of fairies. Entities referred to as devas were said to guide many processes of nature, such as evolution of organisms, growth of plants, etc. Many of these entities, also known as the solar angels, resided inside the sun. The more earthbound devas included nature spirits, elementals, and fairies, which were described as appearing in the form of colored flames, roughly the size of a human. There was a theosophist named E.L. Gardner, a person who studies the philosophies of nature and try to attain the knowledge regarding the origin and purpose of the universe, said that fairies are kind of butterflies whose function was to provide an essential link between the energy of the sun and the plants of earth, and described them as having no clear-cut shape, small, hazy and somewhat luminous clouds of color with a brighter sparkish nucleus. He also said that the growth of a plant as a result of association of three factors, sun, seed and soil, would never take place if the fairy builders were absent. At one time it was thought that fairies were originally worshipped as deities, such as tree spirits and nymphs, a kind of female nature god. According to a Christian belief of 17th century, all fairies were considered as some kind of demons. One belief held that fairies were spirits of the dead. This belief originated from the various stories related to ghosts and fairies. Many such stories has depiction of the dead and fairies living in the underground. One tale recounted a man caught by fairies who found that whenever he looked steadily at a fairy, it appeared as a dead neighbor of his. There is a theory which says that in the history of human evolution, newcomers have always superseded a body of earlier human. In simple words, if we look at the history, we get to know about some groups of people who were not much developed and were easily defeated by the invaders who had iron weapons. The weapons of these people made of stone, bone and wood could not match the iron weapons of the invaders. According to the theory, these defeated people of different groups turned into fairies after their death, and the use of cold iron as a charm against fairies provides a proof that supports the theory. Another theory says that fairies were intelligent species, distinct from humans and angels. In Scottish folklore, fairies are divided into Scilly Coat and Unscilly Coat. The fairies grouped under Scilly Coat are not a big threat to the people, but are still dangerous, whereas the fairies grouped under the Unscilly Coat are more malicious. The fairies of the Scilly Coat generally enjoys playing harmless pranks on humans, while those of the Unscilly Coat often brings harm to humans for entertainment, but both could be dangerous to humans if offended. Less harmful activity of a fairy include stealing small items, leading a traveler to a different direction. Some of the more dangerous behavior of the fairies includes fairy kidnapping, resulting in sudden death of the person, forcing young men and women to perform strange dance every night at different occasions. A considerable amount of folklore about fairies revolves around changelings, a kind of fairy left in place of humans, stolen by other fairies. Such folklore also describes how to prevent the fairies from stealing babies and abducting older people. People have used different kinds of protective charms against fairies, but the most popular type of fairy protection is bread. Bread is consumed as a food by many people, and food being the life-giving source shows a negative association with fairies, which are thought to be a kind of spirit of a dead person. Before going out into a fairy haunted place, it was customary to put a piece of dry bread in one's pocket. In Ireland in 1882, it was reported that if an infant is carried out after dark, a piece of bread wrapped in its dress protects it from any evil. Bells also act as a kind of protective charms against fairies. It is seen that a fairy queen riding on horseback often have bells on their harness. It is said that fairies belonging to Scilly court are seen with bells, who use them as a protection against the fairies belonging to Unscilly court. Earlier people had many beliefs, such as they tried to avoid those paths on which the fairies travel. The front and back doors of the cottages were built in line. Locations such as fairy forts were left undisturbed by the people. There are many stories in which people claims to have countered a fairy. One such story is of a farmer who was pasturing his cattle on a fairy ground. Then suddenly he saw a fairy queen who took the appearance of a great horse with the wings of an eagle and a tail like a dragon, hissing loud and spitting fire. Then she would change into a little man, lame of a leg, with a bull's head and a circle of flame surrounding her body. Few people claims that they have seen a fairy made of gold, but these fairies are very unreliable, and after fulfilling all their demands, they turn themselves into some kind of leaves, gingerbread cakes, or a variety of other worthless things. Besides this, there have been claims by people in the past that they have seen a fairy funeral. One might doubt about the existence of fairies, but there are many legends surrounding these magical creatures. Also, the description of fairies are made in many paintings and literature. So the next time you hear a fairy tale story, remember, there are things in this world which are beyond any explanation.